واحدة من المهارات اللي ممكن نكون ما عارفينها أو عارفينها لكن ما مدينها حقها هي مهارة القراءة بصوت عالي. المهارة دي سحرية في تعلم أي لغة. في المهارة دي أنت يعني بتقدر تبني الفلونسي بتاعتك، تقدر تحسن من الطلاقة بتاعتك أثناء القراءة. الترينس برونانسيشن بتساعدك في تحسين النطق، بتدربك على النطق الصحيح، بتساعدك في الريذم الإيقاع بتاع كلامك، إنك كيف تتكلم بأي إيقاع في أي سياق. البريث كنترول بتساعدك في التحكم في نفسك أثناء الكلام. بتساعدك في أهم حاجة إنك تربط ما بين الكلام المكتوب والمتحدث في حاجة اسمها written language و spoken language. كثير مننا بيخلط ما بين لما يجي يكتب بيخلط السبوكن لانجوج في الريتن لانجوج، ودي حاجة ما كويسة. لكن كونك تاخذ الريتن لانجوج وتدخلها في السبوكن لانجوج دي حاجة عظيمة شديد. تمام، لأنه الريتن لانجوج عندها التركيبة الصحيحة للغة، الكلمات الصحيحة، العبارات الصحيحة لكل موضوع بتكون في الريتن لانجوج، في اللغة المكتوبة. أنا بحر العلوم، مؤسس لانكسو ومتحدث بأربع لغات أجنبية. في الفيديو ده هنعمل شنو؟ هنقرأ قطع من مستوى A1 لحد C2. القطع دي الغرض منها أو الارتكلز دي الغرض منها إنك تتدرب على القراءة. يعني إحنا هنرسل حاجتين، هنرسل الفيديو، هنرسل الفايل ده، الاثنين. انت نزل الفايل وحاول اقرا فيه بنفسك، وتعال صحح نفسك من شنو؟ من خلال القراءة في الفيديو. القطع دي او الارتكلز دي مصممة حسب نظام CAFR. طيب القطعة الأولى هي قطعة A1 beginner level اللي هي مستوى مبتدئ. هتكون قصيرة، هتكون everyday sentences، عبارات يومية أو جمل يومية. My morning: I wake up at 7 o'clock. I get out of bed and I open the window. The sky is blue today. First, I brush my teeth. Then I make coffee. I like coffee with milk. I do not like sugar in my coffee. I eat breakfast at the table. I eat bread and eggs. My cat sits next to me. She wants some food too, but I say no. After breakfast, I get dressed. I wear a blue shirt and black shoes. I take my bag and I leave the house. The bus stop is near my house. I wait for the bus. It comes at 7:30. I go to work. دي قطعة A1 قريناها بالسرعة البطيئة، وقريناها وهي عباراتها عبارات بتاعت مبتدئ. فأنت إذا كنت في المستوى ده ممكن تكرر القطعة دي مرارا وتكرارا قبل ما تمشي اللي بعديها. المقال الثاني أو القطعة الثانية هي A2 مستوى elementary اللي هي قبل المتوسط. حتكون برضو شنو فيها؟ هنا حنبدأ ندمج فيها الماضي البسيط. هناك كنا بنتكلم بالبريزنت سيمبل هو الحاضر البسيط. هنا حنبدأ ندمج فيها أو ندخل فيها شنو؟ الماضي البسيط ومواضيع اليومية. طيب، a walk in the park. Last Sunday, the weather was warm and sunny, so I decided to go for a walk in the park near my house. I left home at 10 o'clock in the morning. When I arrived at the park, there were many people there. Some children were playing football, and other people were sitting on the grass with their families. A few people were riding bicycles along the path. I walked slowly and looked at the trees and flowers. I saw a small lake in the middle of the park, and there were ducks swimming in the water. I sat on a bench near the lake and watched them for a while. After an hour, I felt hungry, so I bought a sandwich from a small shop next to the park. I ate my sandwich, drank some water, and then I walked home. It was a simple day, but it made me feel happy and relaxed. طيب ده المستوى الثاني برضو زدنا السرعة شوية، لكن لسه الكلام بتاعنا بطيء. بس هنا هتبدأ شنو توصل جمل، يعني هتبدأ الجمل توصلها مع بعض، تكون جمل طويلة شوية ما جمل قصيرة زي مستوى ال A1. تعمل براكتس على الحاجة دي مرة ومرتين بصوت عالي. أهم حاجة الصوت العالي، يعني المهارة اللي بنتكلم عنها حاليا هي ما القراءة، هي القراءة بصوت عالي. طيب برضو من الحاجات المهمة هنا هي صيغ الماضي. صيغ الماضي ما كلها بتنتهي بنفس الصوت. طيب فنركز. I decided، I decided تنتهي بشنو؟ ب-id. طيب I arrived، I arrived، I arrived بتنتهي بشنو؟ T. I arrived. طيب I looked، I looked، I looked برضه بتنتهي بشنو؟ ب-T. تمام. and watched، watched، watched شنو؟ watched بتنتهي ب D. فنحن نركز في انه نهايات الباست سيمبل ما كلها نفس الشيء، مره بتنتهي ب T، مره بتنتهي ب D او it. نمشي للمستوى اللي بعديه، مستوى ال B1 او مستوى الانترميديت اللي هو مستوى المتوسط. وهنا بنبدا ندي opinions، آراء، ويكون الايدياز بتاعتنا connected، أفكارنا تكون متصلة. Learning a new language. Learning a new language is one of the most rewarding things a person can do, but it's rarely easy. Many people start with great enthusiasm and then lose motivation after a few weeks, especially when the grammar becomes more complicated or when they cannot understand native speakers. In my opinion, the biggest challenge is not grammar or vocabulary, it's fear. Learners are often afraid of making mistakes in front of other people, so they stay silent instead of practicing. However, mistakes are actually a normal and necessary part of learning. Without them, it is almost impossible to improve. There are several things that can help. First, setting a small daily goal, such as learning 10 new words or listening to a short podcast, is more effective than studying for hours once a week. Second, speaking from the very beginning, even badly, builds confidence much faster than waiting until you feel ready. Finally, it helps to remember why you started, whether the goal is traveling, working abroad, or simply understanding a favorite film without subtitles. That reason will keep you going when the language feels difficult. Since I have been studying languages myself, I have learned that consistency matters far more than talent. طيب هنا بدينا شنو نتعلم ندي آرائنا في المستوى ده. بدينا نجمع أفكارنا مع بعضها والكلمات نفسها، grouping the words. تمام. To group the words into meaningful phrases rather than reading word by word. فتبدأ تجمع الكلمات في عبارات ذات معنى حقيقي، بدلا من انك شنو بدلا من انك تقرا الكلمات كلمة بكلمة او جمل قصيرة. طيب هنا بيبدأ شنو؟ بيبدأ عندك مسألة إنه صوتك المفروض يرتفع أحيانا، المفروض ينزل وفقا للحاجة اللي أنت بتقراها. طيب نمشي للمستوى اللي بعديه، مستوى B2 أو upper intermediate. هنا بيكون عندك مواضيع أكبر شوية، بتبدأ تستخدم الباسيف فويس، ومجموعة من قواعد اللغة بتبدأ تظهر معاك في الارتكلز في المستوى ده. طيب، the rise of remote work. Over the past few years, the way people work has changed dramatically. Remote work, once considered a rare privilege offered mainly to senior employees, has become a standard option at many companies around the world. This shift was accelerated by global events, but it has continued for reasons that go far beyond those regional circumstances. On one hand, remote work offers clear advantages. Employees save the time and money they would otherwise spend commuting, and many report feeling more productive when they can design their own schedules. Companies, too, benefit from lower office costs and access to a wider pool of talent, since location is no longer a limiting factor. On the other hand, this new model brings challenges that are not always discussed openly. Isolation is a common complaint among remote workers, particularly those who live alone or who join the company without ever meeting their colleagues in person. Communication, which used to happen naturally in a shared office, now has to be planned deliberately through messages and video calls. As a result, many organizations have adopted a hybrid approach, combining a few days in the office with several days at home. Whether this compromise satisfies both employers and employees in the long run remains to be seen. But it's clear that the traditional 9 to 5 office routine is no longer the only path to a successful career. طيب، هنا نبدأ نلاحظ لشنو موضوع النبرة، يعني صوتك أو الريزم أو الإيقاع بتاع كلامك كيف يكون وفقا للحاجة اللي أنت قاعد تقول فيها، وفقا للعبارة اللي أنت بتنطقها. تمام. الستريس، stressing the key content words، يعني لازم تضغط على بعض الكلمات عشان تكون ظاهرة. الكلمة المهمة سواء كانت noun أو verb أو adjective لازم تكون ظاهرة. طيب، ده المستوى B2 أو الأبر intermediate اللي هو فوق المتوسط. من هنا بتنتقل لمستوى C1 مستوى المتقدم الادفانسد، ومن بعده C2 مستوى النيتيف سبيكرز أو المتحدث الأصلي. We've come to the C1 level, and at this stage I'll start speaking English. For those who come to this level and for those who are able to read this article over here, it means they have a strong level or an advanced level in English, and so they would be able to understand what I'm saying, right? And so here, this is our article for the C1 level, the psychology of habit formation. And it's tempting to assume that habits are simply the product of willpower, that disciplined people succeed because they possess more resolve than the rest of us. Research in behavioral psychology, however, paints a rather different picture. Habits are less about willpower and more about the environment in which a person operates and the cues that trigger given behavior. According to this view, every habit consists of 3 elements: a cue, a routine, and a reward. The cue might be as simple as a particular time of day, a specific location, or an emotional state. Once the brain recognizes the cue, it initiates a routine, largely without conscious deliberation. And the resulting reward enforces the natural pathway responsible for the behavior. Over time, this loop becomes so deeply embedded that the behavior feels almost automatic, requiring a little, if any, active thought. This has significant implications for anyone attempting to build a new habit, such as reading aloud regularly to improve fluency, rather than relying purely on motivation, which inevitably fluctuates. It's far more effective to redesign one's environment so that the desired behavior becomes the easiest option available. Placing a book on one's pillow, for instance, or scheduling a reading session immediately after a fixed daily event, such as breakfast, provides a reliable cue that does not depend on how motivated one happens to feel that day. Critics of this framework point out that not all habits are created equal. Breaking an entrenched habit, they argue, is considerably more difficult than forming a new one, since the old natural pathway does not simply disappear. It merely becomes dormant, ready to reassert itself under stress. This is why relapse, whether in language learning, diet, or any other domain, tends to occur precisely when a person is tired, distracted, or emotionally overwhelmed. Nevertheless, the practical takeaway remains encouraging. By identifying the cues that already structure our days and deliberately attaching new small behaviors to them, we can, with a reasonable degree of consistency, reshape our habits without depending on an endless supply of motivation we may not always have. And so, as we said here, at this level, you need to focus on intonation. You need to improve your intonation to know where to stop, where to relax, where to rush, and to know where exactly should your voice rise, at which word. And so these are the things or the intricacies, the reading intricacies that you need to develop at this stage. And so they are in the contrast and concession points, for example, when saying, however, nevertheless, on the other hand, you need to understand the certain intonation for each one. And so you have to let your pitch shift noticeably at these connectors to signal the turn, in order to signal the turn that you are making. And so this is the mastery level. If you can read this article, it means you are already at a native level, at least in reading, let's say. Here appears the sophisticated register and the idiomatic and nuanced language. So you have to be able to not only to read, but to understand and be able to use the correct intonations, the correct rhythm in a very natural way. Let's go through this. Artificial intelligence and the future of human work. Every technological revolution has been accompanied by prophecies of mass unemployment, and every one of those prophecies has so far proven at least partially misguided. The mechanization of agriculture did not leave the majority of humanity idle. It redirected labor toward industry and later toward services. It would therefore be unwise to greet the current wave of artificial intelligence with either blind panic or naive complacency. The truth, as is so often the case, lies in the friction between the two. What distinguishes this technological shift from its predecessors is not merely its speed, considerable though that is, but its reach into domains long considered the exclusive reserve of human judgment. Diagnosis, translation, negotiation, even creative composition. A machine that can draft a legal brief or compose a passable sonnet is not simply automating a repetitive task. It's encroaching on forms of cognition we once regarded as quintessentially human. Yet to conclude from this that human labor is rendered obsolete is to commit a familiar fallacy, mistaking the automation of a task for the elimination of a role. Most professions are not monolithic. They are bundles of tasks, some routine and eminently automatable, others requiring precisely the kind of contextual judgment, ethical weighing, and interpersonal nuance that remain for the foreseeable future stubbornly resistant to formalization. The physician who no longer needs to memorize obscure drug interactions may instead spend more time attending to a frightened patient. The translator, freed from mechanical rendering, may focus on cultural subtlety a machine cannot yet fathom. None of this is intended to sugarcoat the disruption that lies ahead. Entire categories of entry-level work along the traditional footholds by which novices gained experience are being hollowed out, and the resulting scarcity of apprenticeship-like roles poses a genuine structural problem, one that markets left to their own devices show little sign of solving unassisted. Policy, education, and corporate practice will each have to adapt in ways that are not yet fully understood, let alone agreed upon. What seems reasonably certain, however, is that the most enduring human advantage will not be raw computational power, in which we were never going to win, but the capacity to ask the right question, to exercise judgment under genuine uncertainty, and to care in the fullest, most demanding sense of that word about the outcome. Whether our institutions rise to meet that challenge remains, for now, an open question. So here you have to aim, as we said, for a near-native prosody, a near-native level. And so you have to vary your base, as you see, to vary your base. Sometimes you need to rush, to be very fast. Sometimes you need to slow down, depending on what you're saying, depending on the structure of the essay or the article that you're reading. And so you have to slow down on the idiomatic turns of phrase. And so when you understand these things, and when you come to this level, you already came to a near native level, and you won't have difficulty. You won't have difficulty in these such things like the turns and the idiomatic expressions and all of this stuff. So we have come to the end of our reading. خلصنا الريدنج بتاعنا 6 مستويات للغة الإنجليزية، وبعد كده إنك أنت هتنزل الفايل ده وهتمشي تحاول تكرر القطع دي وتقراها بصوت عالي. حتى لو كان مستواك مثلا B2، أبدأ من ال A1، أبدأ أقرأ من ال A1 أكررهم بصوت عالي وأمشي أتقدم للأمام. إذا كان مستواك C1 برضه أعمل الحاجة دي. فدي جلستنا بتاعت اليوم بتاعت القراءة، وحابين نسمع رأيكم. يا ريت تكتبوا لنا في تعليقات البوست، سواء هنا أو على اليوتيوب، سواء في تليجرام أو على اليوتيوب أو في أي واحدة من منصاتنا بتاعت السوشيال ميديا اللي حننشر فيها الفيديو. وعايزين نشوف درجة استفادتكم من الحاجة دي، وعلشان نعرف هل نواصل فيها والله حابين نعمل حاجة تانية. لا أنسوا بكم ومعكم دائما.